Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ingrid and this is Ingrid Reads a Lot. It's been quite a long time since I've posted a video. I have missed posting videos and so I'm back. One of my goals of 2026 is to post regularly and I'm not doing so well. Well, I should say in January, catching you guys up. In January, I was on vacation basically the entirety of the month, so I couldn't do it. And then February, I was sort of getting back on in the groove of things. I will say last year I just like felt unmotivated in terms of posting and things like that, and I think I was thinking about this. I think part of it is everything that's going on in this like current climate of politics that we're going through in the United States, and being an immigrant myself. If you didn't know, I'm Brazilian. Just breaks my heart, all of the things that are going on, and in my head especially, like I was thinking, like, what's the point, right? And yes, there are horrible things going on and things need to change, but I think this year I've realized that I want to do things that bring me joy, and this is something that brings me a lot of joy. I just like to achieve something, and that is to be consistent. I think I have never been able to maintain like consistency in this channel, and that's one of the things I want to work towards, because consistently I read a lot of books. I never stop reading, and so it's more of like the filming and editing and like coming up with ideas on what to post and things like that is sort of like I fall off the track. So with all of that said, I still read a ton of really, really good books in 2025, and I wanted to talk to you guys about my top favorite books of 2025. I only have 9 favorites, and I should say, like, I was like, oh, I should just put one more just to be like top 10, but like I don't want to, because I think I want to be authentic in the sense of like, these are definitely the books that I really, really loved. I liked some other books, but these were definitely the top favorites. And I found out a lot about myself during this past year in terms of reading and reading taste. I read a lot of books that I was into. I fell in love with a lot of horror books, and that's not something that I had read very consistently before last year. I will say my 2 top genres of the year were fantasy and horror. But yeah, if you're excited to hear about all the books that were my favorites of last year, then let's get started. Okay, so first up we have The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. This is a book I don't own. I got it from the library when I read it last year, and it is a literary mystery novel set in 1975 originally, but this book has multiple perspectives and timelines, so you're sort of going back and forth between our main character, who's a camp counselor, and then the people involved in the story. So the premise is that the camp counselor wakes up one day and she finds that Barbara Van Laar is missing, and she's not just another kid in the camp. She's the daughter of the owner of the camp, and this story is so atmospheric. It's set in the Adirondack Mountains during summer. I think this would be like a perfect summer read. The thing I really enjoyed about this novel is its writing style. It's flawless. Like the way that the story goes back and forth between people and timelines is done so well, so much so that I didn't feel like it was confusing, because the narrative voice of the characters was so distinct that I didn't get lost in what was going on. We quickly, right in the beginning of the book, it's not a spoiler, find out that Barbara's brother had also gone missing in this camp some years before. The story is the main character, the camp counselor, trying to figure out what happened to both Barbara and her brother, and this was flawless, amazing. If you like a mystery, it's not very thrillery, so that's why I say it's a literary mystery, because of its writing style and because it's not like an action-packed thriller type novel. It's more of like family drama. It talks a lot about self-identity and trauma and what that does to a person, and then how they treat their children afterwards. I absolutely loved this novel, and I think I'm definitely going to try to read more of her books. I think there's another book that this author wrote that I think is becoming a TV series, if I'm not mistaken, but yes, I absolutely adored this. Next up is a book I wasn't expecting to enjoy as much as I did. This is Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. I'm gonna put this down. Oops, making noise. But this is a historical fantasy novel. I say I wasn't expecting to enjoy this because maybe some of you know I did not enjoy The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by the same author, although I do enjoy her straight up fantasy, which is the Darker Shades trilogy, which I have not read Vicious either. So all of that to say is that this author is sort of hit or miss for me. I went into this book with low expectations. In this novel, you're following our three main characters, Maria, Alice, and Charlotte. And they're three women, and this is set in three different timelines. And this is not a spoiler, but this is about lesbian vampires. I absolutely adored the way that this was written. V. Schwab just has a way with her prose. It's almost like you're reading poetry, the way that she writes. And I am so incredibly impressed by this book, just in like a stylistic aspect, but then the story is also really, really good. And I loved following our three characters. I will say I gave this book a 4.5 stars instead of 5 because Alice's point of view felt a little dragging for me, but from Charlotte and Maria's perspective, it was so interesting. I love historical fiction, so this is like that, but with vampires, and I just really enjoyed this like a lot, and I kept thinking about it after it was done. I wanted to get more from like the side characters, that's when I know a book is really well written, is when I'm curious about like characters that we just meet in like passing, you know? I was super impressed by this. I think it has really amazing themes of self-identity, and also it talks a lot about immortality and what that does to a person when you don't deal with your past trauma. I absolutely adored this book, and I was very, very impressed. Next up is another book that I don't own, and that is The Sword of Kaigan by Emma Wang. This is a fantasy standalone novel set in a world that is Japanese inspired. The magic system in this is like elemental magic. I think The Last Airbender. Our core family in this has the power of water and ice. This is set in like a very small village where the people of this village are very proud and known warriors, and they're thought to be the best fighters of this empire. And war is on their doorstep as we start this novel. The novel is centered on Misaki and Mamoru, Misaki being the mom and Mamoru being the kid. We find out, even though like at the beginning of this novel, I felt like this is like a very ancient world, right? Like, you know, they follow like this strict set of rules, and women have to follow what their husbands say, and they're not allowed to have a say in things. So initially you think that this is like not a very modern world. And then we find out that outside of this small area, right, the small village where they live, the world is a lot more modern and advanced, and they have different views for women, and they have different technology. It's just that this particular area has clung so strongly to their like ancient beliefs. I really enjoyed Misaki's perspective because we find out a lot about her history, what happened to her in the past, and I don't want to spoil things, but she used to be a warrior. I just wish we had gotten more from her point of view and like about the other parts of the world. And I do think that, so I read somewhere that this was supposed to be a like series, but the author decided not to write anymore in the series. So for now it's just standalone, but you can kind of get that feeling that like there is more things that we just don't know about, which made me kind of sad because I wanted to know. I wanted to read more books in this world. But this also has very heavy themes of grief. So if you are triggered by that, I would be wary of this book and do it knowingly. Like you can go check what the triggers are. But yes, I thought this was so well done and well written, and I cried like a baby at the end of this. I wasn't expecting it. I think that's all I had to say about this. I think this was so good, such a good fantasy. And last year I read, I think, equal number of fantasy / horror. Like they were my top reads of the year. But I will say I read a lot more horror that I was extremely impressed by than fantasy. So I was so happy that this book made it to the list because I think it was just so well done. And that was The Sword of Kaigan by Emma Wang. Next up we have When the Wolf Comes Home by Nat Cassidy. This is a chase horror. Jess is our main character, and she is a struggling actress. And then one day when she steps out of her building, she finds this little boy hiding in the bush, and he's hiding from his dad. And then after like a very bloody encounter with his dad, they both she helps him and they're running away throughout this entire book. That is all I knew going into this book, and I was so pleasantly surprised by the amount of things that either happen in this book but that you also are grappling with as the reader, and how these different things happened. And I think that you have to go into this book very open-minded, but also with the least amount of information possible. That's all I knew going into this, and I was so pleasantly surprised. And you're just, I don't know, it's just such an amazing feeling as you're reading. I will say this is very gory, so if you don't like gory books, then maybe this isn't for you. But I think you would be missing out, because I fell in love with Nat Cassidy's storytelling in this book. And just at the end of the book, and I guess this is a thing for him, which I didn't know, but the author's note is almost like not better than the book, but it makes you understand the book in a way where, you know, you find out why this author wrote this and what was like, what his mindset was while writing this. And I just really, really loved it. I will say that you're in for a ride with this book, because the things that happen, you're like, what the heck? Like, it's not things that you're expecting. And I think it's just amazing. And I almost cried at the end of this too. So it's like, it's one of those things. It's gory, but it also has a lot of emotion behind it. It talks a lot about familial relationships. This book was amazing, and I want to read everything that Nat Cassidy has written because of this book. Next up, we have Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. This is sort of, what I would say is sort of like a modern classic. When was Kindred released by Octavia E. Butler? I would say yes, this is a modern classic because it was written in 1979, and it's about our main character as she is transported back in time. Our main character is a Black woman, a modern woman, right? But this is written in the 70s, that gets sent back to antebellum South, and she finds out very quickly that she keeps being brought back to this white boy that she is meant to save. The times that she goes back is when he's in dire danger, and she finds out that he's her ancestor. And so she keeps flipping back and forth between modern times and the past, and you're just experiencing alongside this character the horrors of slavery in the South of the United States. I really fell in love with Octavia E. Butler's style of writing, because she doesn't, what I felt like this was, it's not very flowery prose at all. It's very much to the point, and it does not assume that the reader is stupid. There's no over explanation. She expects her readers to read between the lines. I do feel that a lot of contemporary books do a lot of explaining, a lot of telling instead of showing, and this book was it was the complete opposite of that. If you didn't realize it, it's sort of a blend of science fiction and horror, because all the things that do happen to this character when she's in the past are horrific. It's definitely a book that I would consider a classic. I don't know if it is considered a classic or not, but it is in my book. Anyway, next up is a book that I don't own also, and I read it because I was in the mood for Outlander, and that book is The Lost Queen by Signe Pike. This was a book that I saw on one of those lists that is, if you like Outlander, read this. And this is the story of Langoreth, who is, I don't know if she's an actual historical figure, but she is thought to have been the sister of Merlin, and you're reading the story from her perspective. This is set in the 6th century Scotland, and you're sort of going along with her when the Christian faith and Christian people were taking over paganism in the Celtic culture in Scotland and in England and things like that. I think this book was so, throughout the entire book as I was reading, the story is very engaging, but it's when you're reading something historical that you know that the thing is that you know that the characters sort of lose their battle for independence, which is what Langoreth and her family are trying to achieve, is sort of to maintain their values and their culture, right? The Celtic culture and religions, when the Christian faith is coming and sort of trying to take over and destroy everything that they don't align with. And Langoreth makes a sort of political marriage in order to help save her people. And yeah, I fell in love with this book, and it's a series, so I'm really excited to keep going in the series. It's very interesting. There's a little bit of a love story in there, which is also really fun. This book is also classified as like fantasy, but I would say it's a very light fantasy because you don't get a lot of magic in this book. It's more about their lives as they're like dealing with this thing that's going on. And I really loved this. And if you like history and you like sort of that Outlander vibe type thing, it's really good. And I encourage you to read it. Oh, one thing that I will say too, I felt like this book was so well researched. Like everything that you're reading in this book, you can tell that the author put a lot of time and effort in order to write this book, which I really appreciate because, yes, historical fiction is one of my favorite genres, but when it's well done, like especially in movies and things like that, right? I love it all the time, but I think you can kind of tell when it's not well researched. So I really, really enjoyed this. And yeah, and then my top 3 favorite books of the year all have one thing in common, and that is that they are all historical horror. And last year served to sort of teach me that I really enjoyed that type of thing, or where I love history, right? So I gravitate towards historical books, but I also love horror. So it's like meshing 2 of my loves together. And the next book that we're going to talk about is Slewfoot by Brom. This is a historical horror novel set in 1666, so in colonial New England, where our main character, Abatha, is promised to one of these men that lives in colonial England, right? This Puritan lifestyle. And her husband needed a wife, and so they sent her over from England. And Abatha finds herself in this new, cold, bitter world that she feels like she doesn't belong. She's a headstrong character, and thankfully, her husband is a very nice person, actually, but something tragic happens and she finds herself alone in this world, and you're sort of grappling with Abatha and these Puritan views, because the men in this world is who controlled everything. Abatha is on the precipice of losing everything when we meet Slewfoot, which is a sort of pagan entity that had been in these woods long before the Puritans came over to New England. And I absolutely love this. This is like an amazing revenge plot feminist story, and I thought it was so well written and so atmospheric. Like the entire time I was reading this, I was like, I want to go there, but I don't want to go there. You know what I mean? That feeling. And it is considered sort of a horror because of the things that happen, and there's a lot of gore here too. But I should tell you guys that I do like to read a lot of horror, but it's not necessarily scary because I don't like to be scared. But I do love a horror story that is exploring horrific themes, right? And I think that's why I gravitate towards horror. But none of the books that I do love that are horror are scary in any sort of sense, because I can't handle that. So just know that if I do recommend something, most likely it's not scary, at least subjectively in my opinion, right? That's what I should say. And the next up in the category of horror, historical horror, we have Blood on Her Tongue by Joanna Van Veen. This is a book set in the Netherlands in the 1800s, and we're following our main character. I think her sister's name is Sarah. Yeah, it is. Okay. So we're following our main character, Lucy, as she's called to her sister's house by her sister's husband, because Sarah's gone a little bit hysterical, as they would put it back in those days. Anytime a woman was acting any different, they were hysterical. And so Lucy wants to help her sister so that she doesn't get thrown in a psych hospital that is nothing like the modern psych hospitals of the day. But we kind of find out that Sarah and the villagers of this town found a bog body. Sarah couldn't help herself. She had to go near the bog body. And they realized that this particular was like interred with a rock inside the mouth, which was really weird. And so Sarah, goes near the body, and then she is sick for a couple days, and then she emerges very hungry, we should say. And you're following this story. And again, this is one of those stories that you're like, I support women's rights and their wrongs, and I'm here for it. I love a good revenge story. And no, I shouldn't say revenge, because it's not revenge. It's just women taking back their power. And I really, really loved this. I loved the relationship between the sisters. In the book, they're twins, and I found out that the author is twins too. Actually, she's part of a triplet, and you really explore that sort of sisterly bond in this book. And also the writing is just, I don't know, very creepy and atmospheric and very descriptive writing in terms of like the way that the things that are happening are described. So if you are a little bit grossed out by those things, this book might not be for you, but it's amazing. So just go read it and then come back to me and tell me how amazing it was. Okay, last but not least, we have Buffalo Hunter Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones. This is again, historical horror novel. This novel is it's written in epistolary format because we have our main character and she's in modern times. She receives, I shouldn't say she's our main character because, she's sort of like a plot device. Anyway, she receives this journal that was written by one of her ancestors in the early 1900s, and he is a Lutheran priest. And so she receives the books because she's his family. And inside the journal entries, we are getting the confession of a Blackfeet Indian man named Goodstab. And he's sort of confessing to this Lutheran priest. And we just follow him down this road of revenge and historical things that did happen back during Western expansion. I just absolutely adored. This is the book that I read, and I fell in love with Stephen Graham Jones' writing style because it's impossible that someone can write such a compelling story. This was just so well written. Again, this is a revenge story, so if you don't like that type of plotline, then you wouldn't like this book. But the writing was so engaging and so descriptive that I absolutely when you read something and you think the author was born to be a writer, that's how I feel about Stephen Graham Jones. Like, the world would be a worse place if we didn't have his stories. And I believe that with my entire heart. This led me down, I've read, I think, 2 other of his books, and I plan to read the rest of his books because I just think he's such an amazing author. And he has such interesting stories to tell, and I also think important stories to tell. This was definitely my favorite book of 2025. That's why it's last. But I will say that the last 3 books that I talked about are definitely sort of interchangeable. I loved all 3 of these books, and yeah, I also found out about myself that I am into historical horror. So that was one thing I learned about myself in 2025. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know, and I am going to be hopefully posting more regularly, and there are definitely books that I've already read this year that I want to talk to you guys about, and I will see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.